I was mocked as a cheap father by my daughters. Then the truth about their new dad ruined them. After raising them alone for 15 years, my daughters humiliated me by telling me that their mother's new husband was a better father, and they accepted his adoption. They did not know this legally voided their $2 million trust fund. When they came back crying, asking for money, I told them, "You are no longer my daughters. Dad, we are here." Sophia called to me from the entrance of the courthouse. 15 years raising them alone, and there we were in family court so another man could adopt my 16 and 17-year-old daughters. "Are you sure about this?" I asked them one last time as we waited outside the courtroom, holding on to that pathetic hope I still had left. "Mark actually understands what it means to be a real father," Camila answered with a coldness that chilled my blood. "All you know how to say is that there is no money. He's going to take us to Europe this summer and has already promised us the best colleges." Sophia laughed. "Finally, we are going to have a father who is worthwhile, not one who embarrasses us in front of our friends." Inside the courtroom, when the judge asked if they were sure, Camila spoke clearly. "Yes, Your Honor. This man never understood what we needed. Mark is the father we deserve. He has a vision for the future," Sophia added. "Not like him," she pointed at me with contempt. The judge's gavel sounded like a death sentence. Adoption approved. I saw them run to him, to my ex-wife. The hugs they gave them were ones they had never given me with such enthusiasm. Mark looked at me over their heads and smiled. A smile of victory. I left the courthouse feeling like 15 years of sacrifice were not just vanishing but being trampled on. That night, I opened my laptop and looked at the bank account I had kept secret. $447,000. For the first time in years, I smiled. They were no longer my daughters, no longer my problem. They no longer had a right to a single cent of what I had built for them. Although the emptiness hurt, their ignorance of what they had truly lost almost made up for it. The day after court, I could not get out of bed. I called work and told them I was sick. It was not a lie. I felt physically destroyed. I tried to eat breakfast, but the first bite got stuck in my throat. 15 years of sacrifice destroyed in an afternoon. And on top of it all, I had to smile as if I were okay with it. Lying there staring at the ceiling, I remembered something. My mother's trust fund. The girls were no longer legally my daughters. What did that mean for the money? I called Roberto, the lawyer who handled my mother's trust. I had known him since I was a kid. He had been a family friend for decades. "Son, I'm so sorry to hear what happened yesterday," he said when I told him everything about the court hearing. "But there is something you should know. That $2 million trust is now entirely yours." "How?" "Your mother was smarter than you thought. She put in a specific clause. If the girls cease to be your legal dependent, the money automatically transfers to the biological father. She never trusted your ex-wife." I was silent, processing the information. "Roberto, I need you to explain this to me clearly." "It is simple. They renounced you as their legal father. The trust no longer has valid beneficiaries. The full $2 million is yours. No strings attached. That money was never touched because it was intended for when they went to college." I hung up and went straight to my desk. I took my passwords out of the safe and logged into all my bank accounts. $447,000 in my personal account. Now, with the $2 million from the trust, I had $2,447,000. My reward for sacrificing 15 years of my life for them. That same afternoon, I began my own investigation. Roberto had mentioned he knew an accountant who could discreetly look into Mark's finances, but that would take time. Meanwhile, I remembered that Sophia had used my old MacBook during her first years of high school. I found it stored in the closet, and when I turned it on, I discovered her iCloud was still synced. Her messages, photos, everything was there. What I read in the family chats both destroyed and enlightened me. Messages between my ex-wife and the girls dating back 2 years. Every sacrifice I'd made was reinterpreted as a failure. Dad works so much because he does not care about us. He only cares about money. He never takes us to nice places because he is cheap. It is embarrassing that he drives that old car when all our friends' dads have new cars. I am ashamed when he picks me up from school. The other moms laugh at his car. I hope he does not come to Camila's graduation. He will look bad next to the other dads. My ex had built a complete narrative. I was the stingy villain. Mark was the savior hero who took them to expensive restaurants and bought them designer clothes when they visited her on weekends. She had architected this betrayal for years, using every expensive gift to contrast with my miserliness. A week later, the accountant called me with preliminary information about Mark. "Your ex-brother is screwed," he told me bluntly. "He owes $400,000 to private lenders. His business has been bankrupt for 6 months. From the public records I could review, he desperately needs money. And my ex-wife knows this. I am not sure, but from what I could see in public records, she might be lending him money she does not have. That same night, Sophia sent me a video on WhatsApp. She and Camila were posing next to a red convertible BMW. Look what Daddy Mark is going to give us for our 18th birthdays. One for each of us. Finally, someone who invests in our future and understands we need to arrive at college in style. I replied with a simple thumbs-up symbol. The accountant's report got me thinking. If Mark was so desperate, who else would he have asked for money? There was only one person close enough and trusting enough to fall into his trap. I looked up the number for Don Carlos, my ex-wife's father. We had not spoken in a year. Don Carlos, it is Leo. There was a silence on the line. Son, he said in a tired voice, I knew you would call one day. How are my granddaughters? He asked worriedly. I have not heard from them in weeks. My daughter told me they were busy with school. I had to tell him about the court, the adoption, everything. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice trembled with fury. That bastard! Do you know why she would not let me see them? Because she knew I would find out the truth about that Mark. What truth? Don Carlos. That bastard owes me $60,000 that I lent him 2 years ago to save his business. My daughter swore he would pay me back. Now I understand why they wanted that trust fund. His voice grew harder. But there is more. 5 years ago, that guy scammed an insurance company by faking a workplace accident. My daughter helped him forge medical documents. I have copies of everything because she asked me to keep some important papers at my house. Why are you telling me this now, Don Carlos? Because they took my granddaughters from me to protect a con man, and because I am tired of being taken for a fool. If they want to play dirty, I know how to play dirty too. That night, I began to plan something I never thought I would do, an adoption party. I rented the most expensive ballroom in the city, the Crystal Palace, $5,000 for one night. I called my ex-wife. I want to throw a party to celebrate the adoption, I told her calmly, a proper farewell. She was quiet for a few seconds, probably expecting me to cry or beg. Wow, you are finally understanding your place in all this, she replied with an arrogance that now made me laugh. Fine, I accept, but make it a decent place, not some cheap restaurant like always. The Crystal Palace is already booked. Really? Her surprise was evident. Well, then make sure the champagne is Vive Clicquot, not that trash you used to buy. Of course, the next few days were dedicated to preparing 2 PowerPoint presentations with all the information I had gathered. The girls' messages, the accountant's reports on Mark, the insurance fraud documents from Don Carlos, screenshots of the videos showing off the BMWs, and of course, the bank statements showing the millions they had just lost. I also decided to change my appearance. It was not just the gym. I hired a personal trainer, a nutritionist, and a tailor to make me custom suits. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. A week before the party, a package arrived by courier. Inside were all the father-daughter photos I had framed in my house. The ones I had noticed were missing, along with a handwritten note from Sophia. You can keep the memories. We will take the future. That night I burned the photos in the fireplace. I no longer felt pain, only a cold, absolute clarity. The next day, instead of sinking into the sofa, I went to the gym. It was there while lifting, more weight than I had in years that I saw her for the first time. Her name was Elena. Nothing happened that day, but for the first time in a long time I realized there was a world beyond the walls of my house. The audit was over. It was time to collect and maybe to live again. The numbers did not lie, and the numbers said it was time to collect. The first sign that they were panicking came 3 days after confirming the party. My ex-wife sent me a message. I need the guest list to curate it. I want to make sure it is appropriate for the girls. I sent her a list of 40 people. What I did not tell her was that I had prepared a second list with all the people she would cross out. The CO workers who knew the truth about Mark, the former business partner he owed money to, and of course, Don Carlos. Predictably, she returned the list with half the names crossed out. These people are not appropriate for a family celebration, she wrote. Perfect. That same afternoon, Mark called me directly for the first time. Hey, can we talk like men? His voice tried to sound cordial, but I detected nervousness. Of course. Look, now that I am the girl's father, I would like to access their educational accounts. My lawyer says that as their legal guardian, I have the right to manage the trust fund your mother left them. There it was. The real reason for all this, the trust fund. I feigned confusion. Mark, I do not know what you are talking about. Come on, man, my wife told me there was money set aside for their education, a trust your mother established for the girls. Oh, that. I never had access to those funds. My mother handled everything. And then Roberto, the family lawyer, but honestly, he never told me exactly how much was in there. There was a long pause. Could you give me his number? Sure, I gave him Roberto's number, knowing exactly what would happen. He hung up quickly. The next day, Roberto called me, dying of laughter. Son, your ex-wife's husband just called me demanding access to the trust. When I explained that it no longer has valid beneficiaries because of the adoption, he went crazy. What exactly did you tell him? The truth, that the money automatically reverted to you when they legally renounced being your daughters. He was silent for about 5 minutes and then started screaming that it was impossible. That afternoon, my phone exploded. My ex-wife called me furious. "You are a damn thief," she screamed as soon as I answered. "Excuse me? You stole my daughter's money. That trust fund was for them. They were your daughters. They are not my daughters anymore. Remember? You said so yourself in court. You know perfectly well what I mean." "I know exactly what you mean. You had my daughters adopted to steal their money, and now you are furious because the plan backfired." The line went silent for a few seconds. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, her voice trying to sound innocent. "Please." Mark did not just happen to call asking about the girls' educational accounts. This was all a plan from the beginning. She hung up without responding. 2 days later, I received a visit that confirmed how far they were willing to go. A social worker knocked on my door accompanied by a police officer. "Sir, we have received a formal complaint of child abuse and financial neglect," a social worker said. "May we come in?" My heart raced, but I let them in. My house was impeccable, my documents organized. I had been expecting something like this. "The complainants alleged that you denied basic financial support to minors for years, causing them severe psychological trauma. Who are the complainants?" "Your ex-wife and her current husband. They also have signed statements from the minors." There it was. They had convinced my own daughters to formally accuse me of abuse. "May I see the statements?" They showed me the documents. Sophia and Camila had signed sworn affidavits alleging emotional deprivation, intentional financial neglect, and psychological damage due to inadequate living conditions. "These are very serious accusations," the officer told me. "If proven, we are talking about criminal charges." "I understand. Can I have a few minutes to look for some documents?" I went up to my room and came back down with a box full of papers, bank statements, paid tuition bills, school supply receipts, medical bills, everything I had saved for 15 years. Here are all the expenses I covered for the girls for 15 years. Private tuition, private health insurance, extracurricular activities, clothes, food, all documented. The social worker reviewed the documents for half an hour. "Sir, this clearly shows you have covered all basic expenses and more. Is there any reason why the minors would sign these statements?" "Because their adoptive parents convinced them they needed access to a family trust they can no longer touch." I explained the whole situation with the trust, the adoption, and Mark's call. The officer and the social worker exchanged glances. "Do you have proof that the adoption was motivated by money?" the officer asked. "Does a recording work?" I took out my phone. I had recorded the entire conversation with Mark about the trust fund. I played the recording where Mark admitted his lawyer told him he had the right to manage the trust, and where his frustration was clear when I told him I knew nothing about the money. "This is highly irregular," the social worker said. "We will need to investigate these accusations further, but from this perspective, it seems someone is using the system for financial pressure." They left after 2 hours, but not before the officer told me something that chilled my blood. "If these accusations proceed, they will try to request a restraining order and an asset freeze. Have your papers in order." That night, I could not sleep. Not only had they tried to rob me, but they had turned my own daughters into weapons to potentially send me to jail. The next day, I did something I knew would complete their ruin. I called the financial aid offices of both universities where Sophia and Camila were supposed to go. "Good morning. I need to formally withdraw my statement of financial support and my guarantee as a CO signer for my daughter's student loans. Is there a problem, sir?" "They are no longer legally my daughters. They were adopted by another man. Therefore, I am no longer responsible for their educational finances. Furthermore, they just filed a formal complaint accusing me of child abuse and financial neglect." There was a long pause. "Sir, this will trigger an immediate review of their enrollment. Without verified paternal financial support, their adoptive father will have to take responsibility for their financial obligations. He was the one who adopted them specifically to access their educational trust fund." A week later, the effects began to be felt. Camila called me crying. "Dad, I need you to help me with something urgent." "I am not your dad anymore, Kama. Legally speaking, please just listen to me. My university enrollment was canceled, and I also have a $5,000 credit card debt. It was for a trip to Cancun that Mark gave us, but now he says I have to pay for it." So Mark was already withdrawing his generous gifts now that the plan had failed. And why would that be my responsibility? Because you caused us emotional trauma with your cheapness all these years. It is the least you can do." The coldness with which she said it left me speechless. They had just formally accused me of abuse and still expected me to solve their problems. According to the county family court, that responsibility now belongs to Mr. Mark Martinez. Call him Dad. I blocked her for the first time in my life. I blocked my own daughter. That afternoon, I bought myself a Patek Philippe. It was my stopwatch for the end of this nightmare. For the party, I formally asked Elena to accompany me. She was a woman I had started dating after meeting her at the gym, something I never could have done when my entire life revolved around the responsibilities of being a single father. During our dinner before the party, I realized something painful. They had not just stolen my role as a father, they had stolen years of my life that I would never get back. The night of the party, I adjusted my cufflinks in the mirror. The man reflected back had survived the most ruthless attempt at personal destruction he had ever witnessed. I arrived at the Crystal Palace in a chauffeur-driven Mercedes-Benz. When Elena and I walked in, I saw them, Mark sweating in a rented suit, my ex-wife nervous, Sophia and Camila confused, not understanding why their university enrollments had been canceled that week. Their faces when they saw me showed pure terror, but also confusion. For a moment, they did not recognize me. The man walking in was completely different from the tired father they had seen in court 2 months ago. A perfectly tailored suit, a transformed physique, accompanied by a beautiful and successful woman who looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. Mark visibly paled. He realized he had completely underestimated his victim. This was not the defeated loser he expected to see. I nodded towards them. The real guests were arriving. The presentations, including the false abuse allegations, were loaded on my laptop. "Ready," Elena whispered to me. "The show is about to begin." I walked to the small stage in the ballroom. The murmur of conversations gradually faded. All eyes were on me, the real guests I had carefully chosen, Mark's creditors, Don Carlos with a vengeful smile, and of course, my former family in the center of the room, paralyzed with confusion. "Good evening," I said, adjusting the microphone. "Thank you for joining us for this very special celebration. I organized this party to commemorate a significant transfer, a transfer of a duty, a responsibility, and a future." I connected my laptop to the projector. The giant screen behind me lit up. For 15 years, I worked 2 jobs to give my daughters what they deserved. The first slide showed my bank statements. Overtime, double shifts, every cent reinvested. "Sophia, you said my budget spreadsheets were humiliating. Here is the final spreadsheet." $447,000 appeared on the screen. A woman in the front row gasped, "And this is their grandmother's gift." I projected the trust fund and the adoption decree side by side, $2 million. But as you can see, as of May 15th, they are no longer legally my daughters. This money is now legally mine. My ex-wife shot up from her seat. "You stole the girls' money." I stole the money I saved for 15 years. I stole the trust fund that legally reverted to me when you stole my daughters from me. Let us talk about theft, Mark. The screen showed his debts. $400,000 to private lenders. A bankrupt business. My daughters traded a guaranteed college education for a conman. Mark tried to get up, but his creditors immediately surrounded him. But the best part is yet to come. My voice turned glacial. "Remember the abuse allegations you filed against me?" I projected the signed statements. A man in a suit muttered, "My God," as he read. "My own daughter signed this. My father caused me severe psychological damage by denying me basic financial support. Do you know why they lied under oath?" I split the screen. On the left, the video Sophia had sent me. "Look what Daddy Mark is going to give us for our 18th birthdays. One for each of us." On the right, her sworn statement. "The living conditions my father imposed on us were inadequate and inhumane." The silence in the room was palpable. Sophia covered her face, sobbing. "Those statements are false," my ex-wife shouted desperately. "False? Let us see." I activated the audio from my phone. Mark's voice filled the room. "My lawyer says that as their legal guardian, I have the right to manage the trust fund your mother left them." Camila screamed. We did not know, but no one believed her anymore. Don Carlos rose from his seat and walked towards Mark with determined steps. "You," he shouted, pointing at him. "You bastard conman." Mark visibly paled. "Don Carlos, I do not know what you are talking about." $60,000, roared Don Carlos. "You have owed me $60,000 for 2 years, you bastard. You said it was to save your business." The entire room fell silent. Mark tried to back away, but the creditors hemmed him in. "And that is not all," Don Carlos continued, his voice trembling with rage. "You convinced my daughter to forbid me from seeing my granddaughters all so I would not find out you are a useless failure." "Don Carlos, please," Mark stammered. Please, what? Please do not say that you also scammed an insurance company. Did you all know they accused me of abuse to help a criminal? Because it turns out Mark is not just a family con man. I projected the insurance fraud documents. 5 years ago, he defrauded an insurance company. My ex-wife helped him forge medical documents. My ex-wife's face crumbled. Several guests started taking out their phones to record. Mark tried to flee, but Don Carlos blocked him. You're not going anywhere, you thief. You told my granddaughters their grandfather was a bad person so they would not find out you live by scamming people. And here is the perfect ending, I said as I projected the final slide. Not only did they lose the trust fund and my money, the universities did not just cancel their enrollments, they reported them to other institutions for document fraud. They are blacklisted. Sophia and Camila looked at each other horrified. Their educational future had completely vanished. Dad, please, Sophia sobbed. We did not know. You did not know what? That you formally accused me of abuse? That you signed sworn affidavits lying about how I treated you? Or that you did it to help a con man rob me? Mark promised us a paid-for college education, new cars, trips. Camila shouted. He told us you were cheap, that you made us suffer on purpose, and you chose to believe him instead of asking me for the truth. My ex-wife staggered towards me. Leo, can we fix this? You and I, we can. We can what? I interrupted her. Get back together. 3 months ago, you called me mediocre and told me Mark was a better father. Now that you have discovered I have over $4 million, suddenly I am a good option. That is our daughter's $4 million, she screamed desperately. Our daughters. I looked at her in disbelief. We do not have daughters anymore. You took care of that. They are my $4 million, which I earned with my sacrifice, and you will not touch a single cent. I stepped back to the microphone for the final blow. You freed me from my purpose as a father. It is only fair that I free you from my wallet. I took Elena's hand and walked towards the exit arm in arm with her as total chaos erupted behind me. Mark being confronted by multiple creditors, Don Carlos screaming truths at him, my ex-wife being bombarded with questions about the fraud. Where are we going? Elena asked as the chauffeur opened the Mercedes-Benz door for us. Home. As we drove away, I looked back one last time. Sophia and Camila were standing alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the disaster they had helped create. They were no longer my problem. They were no longer my daughters. And for the first time in 15 years, that felt like freedom. It has been 8 months since the party. Mark is serving 2 years in prison for insurance fraud. My ex-wife got probation in exchange for testifying against him, but she is left with a criminal record. Neither of them can get a decent job. Don Carlos recovered $50,000 of the $60,000 he was owed by selling Mark's sports car when it was repossessed. Sophia works as a waitress in a restaurant where she used to take her friends for lunch. Camila stocks shelves in a supermarket during the night shift. They live together in a one-bedroom apartment, splitting the expenses. The BMWs never existed. One Saturday morning, I was in the garden when the doorbell rang. Elena was at the spa, so I went to open it myself. Sophia and Camila were standing on my doorstep. They looked different, thinner, tired, but with something in their eyes I had not seen in years. Respect, maybe fear. Hi, Dad, Sophia said in a shaky voice. What are you doing here? My tone was neutral, not hostile, but not warm either. We wanted to talk to you, Camila replied. If you have time, for 8 months we have worked and thought about what we did to you. We called you cheap when you were working 2 jobs to give us everything. Now we know what it is like to wake up at 5 a.m. to count every penny, Sophia added. We understand you did that for us for 15 years. They cried in silence. Dad, Sophia said, we know we have no right to ask you for anything, but we want to show you that we understand. They showed me spreadsheets of their expenses, part-time work plans, university budgets calculated to the cent. Everything I had done for years while they mocked me. It is a loan. Camila clarified. With interest, we want to earn back the right to be your daughters. I did not say yes immediately. I told them I would think about it. Last week, I sent them a professional contract, an educational financing agreement, a loan at 3% interest, conditional on maintaining a 3.5 GPA, working 20 hours a week, monthly expense reports, and BI weekly progress video calls. They signed it without reading all the fine print. Elena and I moved into a house with an ocean view. I traveled to Europe 2 times this year. I invested the money and it has already generated another $800,000. For the first time in 15 years, I am living the life I want. Last night, I had the first video call with Sophia. She showed me her grades, all the grades. Her budget was perfect. When we finished, she said, "Thank you for giving us a second chance, Dad. You are earning it." I replied, It is not the father-daughter relationship we had before. It is better. It is based on mutual respect, not obligation. They understand the value of things because they are paying for them with their own sweat. My ex-wife sent me messages for months. The last one said, "I hate you. You ruined our lives." I changed my number. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh. Then I remember Camila telling me, "Mark promised us a paid-for college education, new cars, trips. He told us you were cheap by choice, not by necessity. And it passes." Stepping back from the personal emotions of the protagonist, this sequence of events leaves us with a profound look at the law of cause and effect. Every choice of endurance in the past comes with a heavy price in the future. And every moment of pride or manipulation can echo far longer than the people involved ever expect. In this story, what began as a deeply personal family conflict slowly revealed something larger: how easily loyalty can be distorted when comfort, appearances, and social pressure take center stage. The daughters believed the version of reality that seemed more glamorous. The ex-wife built a narrative that turned sacrifice into stinginess. And the man who had quietly carried the burden of responsibility for 15 years became, in their eyes, the villain simply because he lived within limits while someone else promised luxury. Yet when the illusion collapsed, the truth surfaced in the most unforgiving way. Responsibility cannot be outsourced, and respect cannot be replaced with expensive gifts. In many families, similar dynamics unfold in quieter forms. Society often praises sacrifice but rarely explains its invisible cost. We romanticize the idea that parents should give endlessly, forgive endlessly, and absorb every insult in the name of family harmony. Words like duty, respect, and filial love are sometimes used not as values but as tools of pressure. When boundaries finally appear, people call them cruelty. When accountability arrives, they call it revenge. But sometimes what looks like harshness is simply the moment when reality returns to balance. As I look at the story now, I realize the turning point was not the courtroom, the party, or even the exposure of lies. It was the moment when the father decided to stop begging for love and started demanding respect. That decision changed everything. When the daughters came back months later, exhausted by real life, the door was not closed, but it was no longer open without conditions. And that is a truth many people struggle to accept. Forgiveness does not mean returning to the same broken arrangement. Real reconciliation often requires structure, responsibility, and the humility to rebuild trust from the ground up. Maybe that is why this ending feels both painful and strangely hopeful. The family was not magically repaired. The past was not erased. Instead, something more realistic happened. Everyone was forced to face the consequences of their choices, and from that confrontation, a new kind of relationship began to form, one built not on obligation but on earned respect. And that leaves us with an uncomfortable but necessary question. If the people you sacrificed everything for publicly rejected you, lied about you, and only returned after losing the life they chose over you, would you open the door again out of love? Or would you believe that some betrayals permanently change what family means?